This is one of the most chilling, heartbreaking, and unbelievable cases you will ever hear. A young mother, just 22, returns home from celebrating her birthday. 2 hours later, she and her 3-year-old son are found shot dead beside their car. Clues are scattered. DNA points straight to a dangerous killer. Yet justice is frozen for 2 whole decades. What follows is a story of unimaginable loss, shocking delays, and a fight for justice that came too late for the victim's own mother. This is the most gripping, devastating, and unforgettable case. And you won't believe how it finally breaks open. Stacey Ann Falcon was born on October 23, 1971, in Rayon, Washington. She grew up in a loving home with her parents and older brother, though the family dynamic changed when her parents eventually separated. From an early age, Stacey was known for her bright personality. Outgoing and quick to make friends, she was surrounded by a wide social circle. In high school, she met a young man named John, and the two quickly became a couple. After graduation, they packed up and moved to California, ready to start a life together. A few years later, they welcomed their son, Jacob. But after several years on the West Coast, they decided to return to their hometown. The homecoming didn't bring the fresh start they'd hoped for. Their relationship began to unravel, and eventually, they went their separate ways. Stacey became a single mother, determined to raise Jacob on her own. She found work as a waitress, rented an apartment in a small residential complex, and devoted herself to providing for her son. By the fall of 1994, Stacey was 22 and looking forward to celebrating her birthday. On October 23rd, she decided to surprise her mother with a visit, bringing Jacob along. Though they lived in the same city, Stacey's busy schedule and the distance between their homes meant visits were rare. They spent the day together, celebrating, before Stacey and Jacob returned home. 4 days later, on her next day off, Stacey made plans to celebrate with friends. She left Jacob with a trusted babysitter and spent the night club hopping, enjoying the evening. Just after 1:30 a.m., she picked up Jacob from the babysitter and headed home. Around 2 hours later, as the city stirred awake, a newspaper delivery driver began his morning route. Turning onto a short, dead-end street, he spotted a disturbing scene. A parked car, and on the ground nearby, the bodies of a woman and a young boy. He called 911 immediately. Police and paramedics arrived within minutes. The victims had both been shot. It didn't take long for authorities to confirm their identities: 22-year-old Stacey Falcon and her young son, Jacob. Detectives moved in quickly, combing over the scene for clues. Scattered near the car were several spent bullet casings. Inside, they found Stacey's belongings, including her cell phone, still in place. One detail immediately struck them as odd. Both Stacey's and Jacob's shoes were lying several yards away from the vehicle. It looked as if the killer had deliberately removed them, but the reason was a mystery. The puzzle deepened when they noticed Stacey's wallet and jewelry were untouched, suggesting robbery hadn't been the motive. Then came another clue: 3 small white buttons on the ground. They didn't match anything Stacey had been wearing, leading investigators to suspect they may have been torn from the killer's clothing during a struggle. The car keys were wedged awkwardly between the driver's seat and the door. Nearby, officers discovered used strips of tape. It sparked a theory. Perhaps the attacker had planned to steal the car, leaving Stacey and Jacob restrained. But when the keys weren't immediately found, the situation escalated into violence. The autopsies confirmed both victims died from gunshot wounds. Stacey's body bore multiple defensive injuries, evidence she had fought fiercely. Dirt on her socks and trampled grass beside the car suggested she'd broken free and made a desperate attempt to get inside the vehicle. But before she could escape, the shooter opened fire, killing her and Jacob, then dragged their bodies into the road. Medical examiners found no sign of sexual assault, ruling that out as a motive. With the physical evidence collected, police canvassed the neighborhood for witnesses. A few residents recalled hearing a woman scream, followed by gunshots, around 2:11 a.m. But none had called 911. The area wasn't known for its safety, and gunfire was, sadly, nothing unusual there. No one had seen anything, and for detectives, the trail began to grow cold. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support means a lot to us and helps us grow. A huge thank you to everyone who's been watching. With the available evidence, detectives ruled out two major motives: robbery and sexual assault. Their focus shifted to Stacy's personal life, starting with those closest to her. That morning, they went to see her mother. She was midway through her shift at a cafe when the detectives arrived to deliver the devastating news. Her reaction was immediate and raw. She bolted from the cafe, running several blocks before collapsing in the street, sobbing uncontrollably. When officers finally calmed her, they gently began their questions. Could she think of anyone who might have wanted to harm her daughter? She told them Stacy had once lived in the same apartment complex as the babysitter she'd left Jacob with that night. But after hearing gunshots near her home one evening, Stacy decided to move. She had since relocated to another neighborhood, though she still occasionally relied on that same babysitter for help. Her mother also mentioned that Stacy had been seeing a man named Rich at the time of her death. By her account, the relationship seemed ordinary. Rich got along well with Jacob and mostly stayed at his own place. Detectives tracked Rich down. He told them he'd spent the evening at a bar near Stacy's apartment complex. Later, while she was still out celebrating her birthday with friends, he went to her apartment and decided to spend the night there, too tired and too buzzed to drive back to his own place. Rich claimed he woke early the next morning and didn't think much of the fact that Stacy and Jacob weren't home. He assumed they had returned while he was sleeping and left again without waking him. He denied any involvement in the murders and even agreed to take a polygraph test. The results were inconclusive. The examiner flagged several responses as questionable, so Rich remained a person of interest. But there was no direct evidence tying him to the killings. Witnesses at the bar confirmed he'd been there that night, and investigators couldn't find a clear motive for him to harm either Stacy or Jacob. With the investigation stalling, detectives began digging deeper into Stacy's personal life, turning their attention to her ex-husband, Jacob's father. He told police that on the night of the murders, he had been out drinking with friends, then returned home, played a few games of pool with his roommate, and went to bed. His friends confirmed the story, but like Rich, his polygraph results showed several concerning responses. Still, without evidence linking him to the crime, detectives couldn't move forward against him. Forensic specialists combed through Stacy's car and all of the items recovered from the scene, searching for foreign DNA or fingerprints. They found nothing. Then, a potential break. Officers received a call from a local hospital about a suspicious man who had arrived in the middle of the night wearing clothes stained with blood. Detectives rushed to question him and seized his clothing for testing. The man claimed the blood came from a fight with his girlfriend and denied any role in the murders. Police held him until the lab results came back. When they did, the findings ended the lead. The blood was not from Stacy or Jacob. The man was cleared and released. Weeks later, another tip surfaced. Investigators learned that before Stacy had picked up her son on the night she was killed, she'd stopped at a grocery store. Pulling the store's CCTV footage, they spotted her speaking to a man, but his identity remained a mystery, and without more to go on, the lead went cold. The next possible lead came from Stacy's phone records. Investigators discovered that the last incoming call she received was from a man named Scott. When questioned, Scott said he'd been at home with his wife and children the night Stacy and Jacob were killed. He admitted he and Stacy had briefly dated in the past, but their relationship ended abruptly when she learned he was married. Even so, they had remained on friendly terms, and his wife confirmed his alibi. Still, Scott caught the detective's attention. Friends of Stacy recalled an incident at the cafe where she worked. Scott had once left her a $100 tip. For a man with a modest-paying job and a family to support, it was an unusually generous gesture. The more they looked into him, the more they suspected Scott might have been involved in illegal activity, possibly drug dealing. But as intriguing as that lead was, it didn't bring them any closer to solving the double murder. Investigators kept him on their suspect list, unwilling to rule him out. For weeks, the case inched forward without progress. Then, 2 weeks after Stacy and Jacob's murders, something unexpected happened. Scott was found dead. His body had been stuffed into the trunk of an abandoned car. Scott's brother told police that on the day he disappeared, Scott had planned to confront a man named Vince. The two brothers ran a small side business fixing up cars and had installed an expensive sound system in Vince's vehicle. But Vince had never paid them. Scott, his brother said, had gone to demand the money, so he was convinced Vince had killed him. Detectives tracked Vince down. He denied any involvement, but a search of his apartment told a different story. Investigators found traces of Scott's blood inside and learned Vince had been using Scott's credit card after his death. Vince was arrested for Scott's murder. Detectives on Stacy and Jacob's case questioned him, hoping he might know something about Scott's possible connection to their deaths. But Vince had nothing useful to offer. Another lead, gone cold. For months, the investigation into Stacy and Jacob's murders went nowhere. Then, just before his trial for killing Scott, Vince made an unexpected move. He pleaded guilty. In court, Vince claimed he had acted in self-defense. According to his version, Scott had threatened him during a confrontation. Vince went further, alleging that Scott had confessed to killing Stacy because she planned to tell his wife about their affair. He also claimed he and Scott were partners in the illegal drug trade. Detectives weren't quick to believe him. The timing was suspicious. Only days before facing trial for murder, Vince was suddenly casting Scott as both a killer and a drug dealer, while portraying himself as the victim. Still, with no other leads, they had little choice but to follow up. The deeper they dug, the weaker Vince's story became. Scott's wife was adamant. Her husband had been home with her the night Stacy was murdered. He couldn't have been across town committing a double homicide. Scott's brother also dismissed the idea of an ongoing affair between Scott and Stacy, insisting they were close enough that Scott would have confided in him if it were true. As for drugs, his brother flatly denied any involvement, saying they made their living honestly by repairing cars. In the end, detectives concluded Vince's tale didn't add up. It looked like nothing more than a desperate attempt to deflect blame for his own crime. After that, the case went cold once more. Years passed without progress, the file gathering dust. The only person who refused to let it go was Stacy's mother. She kept contacting detectives, but over time, one by one, they either retired or were reassigned. Eventually, she was told the case would be transferred to Seattle's cold case unit. But when she tried to follow up, she learned the unit had been shut down, victim to budget cuts. In the early 2000s, a new lead surfaced. An inmate contacted investigators, claiming that his acquaintance, a man named Charles, had confessed to killing Stacy and Jacob. According to the informant, Charles worked with Stacy at the same cafe, and both were allegedly involved in selling illegal substances. The story went that Stacy had threatened to turn him in, and that threat had cost her life. Detectives were skeptical. The account felt far-fetched, but with no other leads to pursue, they decided to look into Charles's possible connection. They sent all existing evidence from the case back to the lab, hoping advances in forensic technology might reveal traces of DNA missed during the original investigation. But there was a major obstacle. The lab was already drowning in work. Detectives were told they'd have to wait a full year for results. That call finally came in 2002. Using modern tools, analysts had pulled DNA from the gloves and duct tape found at the scene. They had a match, but it wasn't Charles. The profile belonged to someone who had never appeared in the case files, not once. His name was Jerome Jones. When investigators dug into Jones's history, what they found was alarming. His rap sheet stretched back to his teenage years. Robberies, assaults, car thefts, drug charges. Then came the most chilling discovery. In 1995, just 1 year after Stacy and Jacob's murders, Jones and an accomplice had gunned down a businessman outside his California home. In 1998, he was sentenced to life in prison. Investigators soon uncovered a disturbing connection. In 1994, Jerome Jones had been living in the very apartment complex where Stacy once resided, before she moved out over safety concerns, and where her babysitter was still living at the time of the murders. Even more unsettling, Jones had worked at the very club where Stacy spent the night celebrating her birthday with friends. Detectives traveled to another state to question him in prison. Jones flatly denied any involvement. Every follow-up attempt ended the same way: stonewalling and silence. But the science told a different story. Direct DNA testing confirmed that the biological material found on the gloves and duct tape at the crime scene belonged to him. The problem was, those items only provided circumstantial evidence. It was damning, but not enough for a conviction. Determined to strengthen their case, detectives turned to the biological samples taken from the victims' bodies during the original investigation, evidence that had been carefully preserved for decades. This time, forensic experts made a breakthrough. From a sample collected from Stacy's mouth, they identified biological material matching Jones's DNA. The finding not only tied him directly to her, but also revealed that Stacy had been sexually assaulted. More evidence soon followed. Jones's DNA was also discovered beneath Stacy's fingernails, clear signs of a violent struggle. With the case now supported by multiple layers of forensic evidence, detectives approached the district attorney to discuss filing murder charges. But they hit an unexpected roadblock. The DA wasn't convinced the existing evidence was strong enough to definitively secure a conviction for the double homicide. The district attorney, still unsure the case could hold up in court, asked crime scene experts to reconstruct the murders using the newly uncovered evidence. The goal was to build a clearer picture of how Jerome Jones could be connected. What happened next remains murky. Whether the reconstruction was ever carried out is unknown, but the momentum stalled, and no charges were filed. Perhaps investigators felt less urgency knowing Jones was already serving a life sentence for another murder. Or maybe they feared the evidence. even with multiple DNA matches, still wouldn't guarantee a conviction. Whatever the reason, the case was shelved yet again. The most devastating part? Police never told Stacy's mother about any of these developments. For years, she had fought relentlessly for answers. But as time passed and investigators moved on or retired, her points of contact disappeared. Refusing to give up, she began piecing together every scrap of information she could find, working alongside her sister. The effort consumed the next 15 years. Then, in 2017, her sister passed away, leaving her to carry on the search alone. Every lead she chased led to a dead end. Then, in 2019, the case caught the attention of a Seattle journalist. He reached out to Stacy's mother, digging into the investigation himself. Eventually, he uncovered a shocking fact. Police had matched DNA from Stacy's body to Jerome Jones more than 15 years earlier. The journalist was stunned. With multiple DNA matches tying Jerome Jones to the murders, he couldn't understand why no charges had ever been filed. When he shared his discovery with Stacy's mother, she was crushed. For years, she had begged for updates, only to learn that police had been sitting on evidence linking a suspect to her daughter's murder and done nothing. Seeking answers, the journalist contacted a former detective who had worked the case during that period. Why? He asked. Hadn't Stacy's mother been told about the DNA match? The detective admitted that, at the time, the evidence felt too inconclusive to draw firm conclusions. He also confessed he'd been juggling multiple cases and simply didn't have the time. When the journalist posed the same question to the district attorney, the response was equally disheartening. Notifying victims' families, the DA said, wasn't his responsibility, and it had never even occurred to him to do so. The journalist laid out everything he'd learned in a detailed article. The piece ignited public outrage and brought Stacy and Jacob's case roaring back into the spotlight. A new team of detectives took a fresh look at the evidence. They were stunned to see the DNA results pointing directly at Jerome Jones, and equally shocked that no charges had ever been filed. They began preparing the case for trial. Then, an alarming twist. Jerome Jones, still serving a life sentence for another murder, was unexpectedly granted parole, despite not being eligible for release until at least 2030. The news lit a fire under investigators and prosecutors. If Jones walked free without facing charges for Stacy and Jacob's murders, they might lose their only chance at justice. By early 2022, they moved quickly, filing official charges against him. The moment Jones was released from the California prison, he was extradited to Washington and placed in custody to await trial. Tragically, Stacy's mother never lived to see the day the man accused of killing her daughter and grandson would be brought to justice. She died just 4 months after Jerome Jones's arrest. Even so, prosecutors were determined to see the case through and finally deliver justice for Stacy and Jacob. Drawing on decades of evidence, they pieced together what they believe happened that night. According to investigators, Jones allegedly confronted Stacy almost immediately after she left the babysitter's home. He may have forced her to pull over at gunpoint, or perhaps she stopped for another reason, and he approached the car. Prosecutors believe his initial plan was to steal her vehicle. At some point, that plan escalated. Jones allegedly pulled Stacy from the car and tied her hands, intending to assault her. In the struggle, she broke free and ran back toward the car, where her young son had been waiting. That's when, prosecutors say, Jones pulled the trigger. He shot them both, then dragged their bodies into the road. He attempted to take the car, but the keys were hidden, jammed between the seat and the door. Unable to find them, he fled the scene, leaving behind several pieces of DNA evidence that would later tie him to the murders. In May 2023, during preliminary hearings, Jones pleaded not guilty. The prosecution began preparing for trial. As of now, the trial has yet to begin. Jones remains behind bars, facing the possibility of a life sentence if convicted. It has taken nearly 30 years to reach this point. But at last, the case is on the verge of resolution, bringing long-delayed justice to a mother and her son. The most frustrating part is that Jerome Jones could likely have been charged as early as 2002, just 8 years after Stacy and Jacob were killed. Yet, for reasons that remain unclear to this day, it would take another 2 decades before charges were finally filed. During all that time, Jones remained behind bars for another murder, while Stacy's mother lived in the dark, heartbroken, waiting for justice that never seemed to come. Now, as Jones finally faces the possibility of being convicted for their murders, she will not be here to see it. Share your thoughts on this story in the comment section. And don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.